Well, let's go ahead and welcome everybody. We'll start out with our invocation and pledges of allegiance.
Almighty and merciful God, we ask your guidance and blessings upon this board, students, parents, patrons, teachers, and administrators, as we are assembled here this evening in the common pursuit of this great nation's wealth, our children. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
All right, thank you, Trustee Lopez. Once again, everybody, good evening to you and welcome. This is a called meeting of the Northside Board of Trustees. Before calling the meeting to order, the board would like to take just a moment to briefly review some of the rules for conducting our meeting. Remember, the order of our business is set out in our agenda for this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct board business, and for that reason, it is held in public. It's not a public forum. However, we do provide the opportunity for our audience participation. If there's anyone here that wants to sign up to our one of our two agenda items we ask that you please complete and sign up at the sheet that's located in the entrance to this room. This is so we don't overlook anyone who may want to address the board this evening on those agenda items. Do we have any? Table looks empty. Nobody say anything? Barry's doing this? Okay, I think we're good then. All right. So we won't have to review the rules for addressing the board, and we'll go ahead then and officially call the meeting to order. And we'll turn over to our great superintendent, Dr. Kraft.
Yes, sir. So we thought this evening would be a great opportunity to really begin the conversation in and around our fiscal year 25, or better known as the 24-25 school year budget. I'm going to provide some context, and then I'm going to turn it over to really the brains behind the outfit. There's been a lot of work done, and again, in segueing and really, I guess, working backwards, we're really working hard in preparation for the upcoming Finance Committee, because I know there will be a lot of questions. The board meeting, of course, on the 23rd, and then in May, really trying to tackle compensation and getting the big variables solidified with this upcoming budget. Again, we don't anticipate, this won't be a legislative session year. I'll talk a bit more about that momentarily, and I don't anticipate there to be a special session. I think that the next opportunity for our legislators to address public school finance will be with the beginning of the 89th legislative session next January, which is hard to believe, but 9 months away. So again, I appreciate your attentiveness. I know there's going to be a lot of information presented, and that was really by design. We wanted to make sure that we were looking at ADA, enrollment, and a lot of the variables that obviously, as you well know, are big budget drivers. It's going to be challenging this year. You're hearing the reports, you're probably hearing about the multi-million-dollar deficit budgets that other districts, particularly those that are on a July fiscal year, are already in the process of reviewing and will shortly be adopting. You're hearing about program changes, you're hearing about reduction of library services. I mean, it's everywhere. In fact, I have not spoken to a colleague yet that is not planning to adopt a deficit budget, and probably the largest deficit they have. So that being said, I know that there's been a comparison to what transpired in the 2011 era when the state legislature cut over $4 billion from the state budget. Of course, that was a time of recession. That's not exactly where we are, even though it somewhat feels like it. And what I mean by that is, if you recall, we really were working on kind of this more reduction in force and reduction of expenditures, obviously, because there just wasn't the money in the state coffers. That's not the case. And I think that's an important reminder. The state has money to adequately support public education. It didn't happen. We went through 246 days in the 88th legislative session, so a full regular session, 4 special sessions, and we were hopeful, if you recall, when we brought forward a proposed budget for fiscal year 24, that school funding would be addressed during that regular session, and it just didn't happen. And I can kind of explain and fill in some gaps. Now, that's not to say a school safety initiative was funded at $15,000 per campus and 18 cents per student as in the form of a school safety allotment. That fails in comparison to the $10 plus million that we spend annually on school safety. And then, of course, the mandates that followed to include armed security officers, which, if you recall, you approved the additional allocation so that we could work to accomplish that objective. But like I say, beyond that, there really was not any additional funding. When we finished the regular session and we started into the special sessions, it became very apparent that property tax relief was going to be the #1 initiative, and it was passed, thus resulting in a property tax compression that there's still a lot of questions in and around the sustainability. As we rocked along, particularly into the second, third, and the last special session, there was proposed legislation, we can call it an omnibus bill, but we never could get past the point of uncoupling ESAs, vouchers with school finance. It was almost impossible, directly impossible, to separate the two from a legislative standpoint. And so it was a big stalemate. Again, we saw no increase to a basic allotment. That was desperately needed to the tune of about $1,100 just to keep up with inflationary pressures. And so the legislature died, and they went home. That being said, again, being 9 months away from the 89th legislative session, there have been some things that have transpired. The primary election results are still being finalized. There are some key runoff elections that will absolutely shape what the representation looks like in the House here in the coming months. And I think that just kind of leads us to, okay, well, what is and again, this is just my conversations, and what I'm hearing are going to be big priorities on the horizon. Depending on what happens in these runoffs, depending on what happens, obviously, in the general election in November, will absolutely dictate what the House leadership looks like and how that's going to be shaped. And like I say, without going to remain apolitical, those are big variables still that are question marks, because that will absolutely dictate and drive a legislative agenda, which we're going to be proposing resolutions, submitting to TASB. Like I say, we're tracking that already. Here's what I do anticipate. Once it's established as to what the leadership role or roles to include committee chairs will entail, we'll start to have a pretty good feel as to what agendas are going to be driven. One of the major agenda items, I'm almost positive, is going to be, once again, an attempt to address housing affordability, which is becoming critical across the state of Texas, and property tax relief. In fact, there have been suggestions already being made very vocally that the surplus that the state of Texas has beyond the ESF or rainy day fund just needs to be applied to additional property tax relief, possibly even the elimination of an M&O tax rate for school districts, which structurally has a lot of issues. So that'll be a big priority. I do think that school choice, ESAs, vouchers will also be a priority. I don't know that it will be the #1 priority, but I think it'll be a priority along with school funding. Can those two items be separated is still a big question. School safety, academic accountability, instructional materials. I think library books will be a topic that will be probably brought up in the legislative session, and then other programs like virtual school. And how to fund virtual school, especially if school districts want to stand that up. So I've been asked, well, does our focus need to be at this point in time in the juncture? And I will argue that right now, we just need to remain focused on taking care of students and staff. That needs to be our focus because there are so many unforeseen variables that are hard to predict, hard to project, and going forward. Again, I don't anticipate any type of a special session called this summer. And so from a budgetary standpoint, that really leads us to, okay, we need to start looking at current funding formulas and really what we call rolling the budget forward. So with that being said, just a few reminders. This current fiscal year 24, as you recall, we adopted a $29 million deficit budget. We also provided staff a 3% general pay increase and the $1,200 retention payment earlier this fall. Again, this was all in hopes that the legislative session would provide some relief with additional funding as a result of, at that time, was a $20+ billion surplus. Again, it didn't happen. So as we're looking at fiscal year 25, we anticipate no increase to the basic allotment. That, like I say, would require obviously legislative action, and I don't think there's going to be an opportunity to do so. We're going to be seeing a reduction, which we'll dive into a little bit deeper here momentarily, with our ADA, average daily attendance. So this past year, or this current fiscal year, we budgeted 94,200. We'll be bringing that down to a more conservative estimate of 93,500. You've heard about and you have been a part of the conversations in and around the SHARS revenue reduction. That is also going to be a pretty big variable, a pretty big hit as far as the revenue is concerned as a result of having to make that adjustment to the tune of about $19 million annually. We'll talk a little bit more about that in detail. The ESSER funded positions.
How much regarding the SHARS?
19 million, and we're going to dive into it, Karen, here just a little bit deeper because it's the timing of when we anticipate that reduction to occur as well. Part of which has already been accounted for with the Budget Amendment 2, which was just recently approved. Okay, that brings me to ESSER funds. ESSER funds expire in September, and we knew that this day was coming. As a lot of districts did, we have utilized ESSER funds to, and I don't want to use this in a negative connotation, but to supplant a lot of current positions. Well, those positions now will have to roll back into the general fund because of as a result of the ESSER funds expiring. And we'll work through and talk a little bit more in depth about what positions those will entail. The other piece that I think is important to note, because I know that the equation, as you're looking at student enrollment and particularly ADA weighted funding, but then you're also looking at, well, how are we making corrections from an FTE and a staffing equation formula? Well, it's a little bit more complicated because as you have student demographics shifting and changing, i.e. special education students, increasing bilingual educated students, newcomers academies. Bless you. We all know that these are more intense programs that require additional resources and additional instructional support, and that's what we're seeing. So you'll see some of that information and data. Inflationary cost, we're experiencing it. CPS rate increases. What I call the cost of doing business. So whether it be charter buses that are traveling now to Eagle Pass, the refurbishment of band instruments. I mean, we're experiencing, just as everyone is, those inflationary pressures. And again, I think it's important to note that unlike a business or any other form of commerce that can really, in essence, pass along those increased costs to customers in the form of goods and services, we don't have that ability, obviously. And then, of course, competitive pay, and that's really another big variable in this conversation. we want to try to be as competitive as we possibly can, particularly in the critical shortage areas, which we can look at some staffing and vacancy reports here momentarily. And so I know that was a lot. That was actually the preview, believe it or not. And like I say, I know that there are probably going to be a lot of questions that we just felt like, let's give the information, provide the information as to where we are now, knowing that we have some runway with the upcoming Finance Committee and, like I say, future board meetings to be able to really delve in and address. I will say this, the positive is that I do feel like, even though you're going to see some staggering statistics and information, I feel like that we'll navigate fiscal year 25 budget. My greater concern at this point is actually fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27. In other words, the following biennium. Because I do think that what actions we take collectively right now with fiscal year 25 absolutely segues and really stages fiscal year 26 and 27, not fully knowing what is going to happen with the upcoming legislative session. And so I think it's really important as we're working through this, I'm always thinking, what does 26 and 27 entail and look like, even though I know that it's probably feels like it's light years away. So with that, we'd like to kick off with, like I say, one of the major drivers, which I know we've discussed, ADA, yes, but also to get to ADA, we have to almost start with enrollment and enrollment trends. And so I think you've been provided a lot of information. We're going to work through it. If you have questions, please let us know. Debbie McNary has done a pretty tremendous job along with Adrian Gutierrez. I don't know if you've all had the opportunity to meet Adrian. He works with our public information management system numbers, and so it's been absolutely awesome in that role. So I'll turn it over to Ray, and we'll go ahead and delve in.
Monica, can you go back one slide? I just want to start by saying I am one of 6 there, so I want to set the kind of the stage there. And really my goal is to provide some context. Remember, this is a budget update, but as Dr. Kraft said, enrollment, ADA, of course, is a part of that whole budget. And so I say that also because a lot of information in your packets, and really, Ms. Freeman, I'm looking at you because we've had the discussion at your request, probably really to go into the detail of this, probably at a policy committee is probably best. So whatever questions we don't get to today, certainly we want to follow up in terms of a policy committee to go into real detail in terms of enrollment and ADA. And so with that, I'm going to kind of go teacher on you, and you have a blue folder like this, and there's a lot of paperwork in there. I'm going to ask you to, and I'm going to go in order and try to highlight, again, give you some context about enrollment and ADA. And the first one should be after your PowerPoint presentation, a packet that's titled PEAMS Data Campus Enrollment by Year. And so if you can pull that one up, and I know some of you, Dr. Duran, you are already making notes. So I know you probably have some questions. And again, if we can hold on to them, and again, if need be, we certainly want to have a detailed presentation in the future. So enrollment, as you know, has been dropping in Northside. So I direct your attention to the very top line. And that top line, if you start to the left, you'll see the current year, 23-24, and underneath that, as a district, 101,095 students. That was our enrollment this year. If you go to 1920, you go over to the right there, you can see that pre-COVID, that was our peak. We were at 107,824. And now work your way back to the left, you can see the year 2021, 21, 22, and so forth. And so what that means, if you go all the way still front line, top line to the very right, you'll see 4 years, we have lost 6,729 students since 1920, the 2019-2020 school year. So that gives you some perspective there. And I should have said also for this presentation, you've heard of 10,000 foot. This is more of a 30,000 foot because we really just want to give you an overview. So direct your attention down to the left-hand column. Look for Holmes and J to give you a little bit more in terms of, so you see the district enrollment and how it dropped. If you find J High School, you'll find that under the 1920 school year, They were almost at 2,800 students, 2,797, if you can see that. And then you work your way to the left to the current year, they're down to 2,100 students. You might say, also, is that kind of the type of school and community rate? Well, not really. Look at O'Connor, just 2 rows down. O'Connor in 1920 was over 3,200 students. You work your way to this year, they're at 2,586. So we really can't say that it is a certain part of the district. There are certain pockets, you would say, that are still growing and others that are not. And so I say that because, of course, Jay and O'Connor, 2 different parts of the district, but both of them a decrease. A couple more, and I'll stick to the front page there. If you go to the middle schools and you see Neff and Pease, they, under the 1920 school year, were over 1,000 students. Currently, this year, they started at 880 and 737. And then Stevenson, the very last one on that front page, and this will be the last one, there were over 1,200 students in 2019-20, and they're down to 884. So that gives you a little bit of perspective of how our enrollment in Northside, and at your leisure, again, you can look through and look at some other schools as to what some of the drops are. And so, but that gives you an idea of how enrollment has dropped. So,
Ray,
do we know where they went? I'm sorry.
yeah, you're gonna have, I think we're gonna have 2 questions. Carol,
Okay.
I'll go after Carol. Dr. Hall, you can go ahead. Yeah, I'll go after you.
Yeah, Ray, and then I'm just trying to see the color coding. There were some schools that actually increased, like Taft, went from 2,500 to 2,700. So, are the ones that increase the grays on the right? So if I see gray on the right, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, that mean that's the color for increasing.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's green on mine, but there is a little bit of green, correct? And red, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it looks very
We're all
So,
looking.
so we're going with green and red
Civil
with,
War-ish.
with, you do have pockets due to certain either boundary changes, program changes that might have led to a slight increase. But by and large, again, the point of this packet is to see and highlight the red and
Right.
how we've dropped.
No, the reason why I brought it up is like if we did have a school and we don't have any extenuating circumstances or program changes or whatever, did we add a magnet school? I get all that, but if like Taft, I think has stayed Taft. It'd be kind of interesting to see how did they increase or why did they increase? And maybe Debbie can say, oh, there were 3 neighborhoods that were built overnight there.
And
Something
all
like
of
that,
those
but-
will have that type
Okay,
of detailed
just-
story? Yes, ma'am, and.
Or is Taft doing something to attract students? I'm just,
Oh, that too, and again, but most of them we can go into
yeah.
and
Most
we'll-
of it's red.
yes.
Okay, I'll be
So,
quiet.
so the question is, so where are the students going? Do we know?
I got one more. I'm sorry.
sorry.
You're gonna kill me. We're gonna let you get through it eventually.
Okay.
The other question I have, so going back years, and really appreciate this information. I'm glad y'all compiled that. One other question I had, if we would have looked at the growth that was anticipated, so I'll be real specific. So I know we expected tremendous growth out in the far west part of town, okay? Stevens ran all those type of things, middle elementary school, et cetera. That actually may not be at the level we thought. So it may be that even though it's in the green, it still may not be as high as we had initially projected. So it's not necessarily a matter of one losing. We may, for J-Air, we probably expected not to, but when we had those numbers, the huge numbers, 111, et cetera, we're gonna have, that's because we expected a lot more growth out there. Am I accurate on that statement? Debbie sort of,
You're looking at Debbie, so I'll let her answer.
yeah, is it, okay.
Yes, sir. It is correct. Some things you can attribute, you mentioned Stevens Ranch.
Yeah.
Stevens Ranch is not developed as
Right.
quickly as we had
That's
expected,
right.
given all the competition in that area.
Yep.
But the outflow of students that we see going to the charter schools that are in those
Oh,
areas
yeah.
have definitely
Right.
impacted all areas of the district. Yes, we still have high growth in those areas, but not to the level we had originally.
That's what I thought. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, good segue there, Mr. Blunt, actually, I appreciate that. So, we go to packet number 2, because the question you, I'm sure, are asking, so where are our students? Do we have an idea where they're going? Yes. So, if you get this packet, this is from Region 20, and I will preface by saying the accuracy, it's accurate to the point to where we know, and it gives us a good idea of the numbers and what we're dealing with. This is as of October 27th, in the fall of this school year. And so if you look at it and skip the first part and look at, okay, this shows where students are coming from, which is a very short list at the top, transfers from, but I direct your attention to transferring out. where do we know and have some data that our students are going? If you look to transfers out, third one from that title, you'll see bases, has almost 2,000 of our students, 1985. If you flip the page, you'll see third one from the top, Great Hearts has 2,848 of our students. Harmony Public Schools below that, over 1,000. And then of course IDEA, a few below that, over 2,000 students, 2,153. So some of this, because of data input and so forth, we know is not completely accurate. But this, for those of you that have been following, of course, in terms of where our students and the charter movement, shouldn't come as a surprise, but now gives you a little bit of context in terms of numbers and who they are. If you flip to the third page, you'll see the grand total of over 17,000 students that, according to this report, our students are out and about. There are other districts that on occasion we still have students that go to, but by and large, it's charter schools that we've known now for a while that they've gone to. Some of this, not on this one also, but as far as where they're going, we know that homeschooling is an issue, and we know that some of these charters offer a virtual option, which there too, that's adding to our students moving on to other districts, or in this case, charters. So the next one, keeping the theme of charters, which we know and have known for a while, the next, if you will, exhibit number 3, I guess, is a long page, color-coded. Some of you might be familiar with it, that Debbie has put together. Thank you, Debbie. Outstanding table here, or map. The green, maybe great for Dr. Harrell, area, is Northside ISD. And so you'll see in that area, I counted 41 charters in Northside, of which 33, if they have a yellow halo around there, have over 100 students of ours. So that, I think, for visual learners kind of puts things in perspective as to where our students are going. And you can see the rest of the metro area of San Antonio, but how Northside certainly is a popular area for charters to come in. And every number that you see inside the circle corresponds to a number to the right. And I know it's very small print, but again, at your leisure, you can look through and see, is this going to match or should match the chart that I just gave you with the charter schools. But now this gives you actual geographic location as to where some of these schools are popping up. And so again, 41 in our area, 33 of them with over 100 of our students. And you can see little clusters. If you're wondering where that cluster is toward the bottom there, bottom left, I guess you could say, that's the John Jay, Meadow Village, Westwood Terrace, Glen area, where you see a little cluster of those charter schools. And again, all the different names that go with them. And so this, and you can see Debbie even put some new ones, A, B, and C, a little further away from Northside. But this trend continues in terms of charters and where they strategically build their schools, and at least for Northside and other districts as well, are pulling some of our kids from. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm also looking at transfers out to our area ISDs, Bandera, East Central, Northeast, SAISD, Edgewood, Southwest. I mean, we've got a lot going to other ISDs. And I just want to bring that up only because just in visiting several school districts, a lot of school districts are entertaining open enrollment. We do not do open enrollment, or do we? No. And do we do tuition based enrollment?
Yeah, so we have not advertised an open enrollment as an open enrollment district. There are some, obviously, employee transfers, but that's definitely an option. And the 1,289 in particular to San Antonio ISD, I mean, I've challenged that, and Debbie, I think you can pretty well affirm that that is actually a real number. Now, it's a little bit more difficult to track exactly to what campus or to which campus, but it's a great point.
Well, I think if we add up, I know we're hitting charters hard here, but if we add up all the ISDs, that we used to have kind of a gentleman's agreement, or gentleman and ladies agreement among the superintendents, that we would preserve the kind of boundaries. So I bring that up now because it looks like that's gone, and we may want to,
Go ahead.
well,
Partially.
Partially is a good
partially,
answer.
because a lot, some of
Also,
these
yeah,
are
I'm
tuition.
careful
I
with-
know Harlandale was tuition only. I know some are tuition based, and they're taking kids on tuition, and that way you can decide who you want and who you don't want, just like charters. But if it's open enrollment, so something to think about for a future meeting, or maybe in policy, Karen, I don't know, but something to look at. Just because these are a lot of numbers. These are a lot of kids leaving us.
If we, go ahead, I'm
But
sorry.
I wonder if they're leaving us because they're moving to that area.
This is
That
a
we
lot of
don't know.
kids. These are a lot of, but look at,
Well, I'm looking at the ISDs in
Yeah.
Bear
Exactly.
County, but because to me, I think some of it
Right.
is that they're moving out of Northside.
I'm sure, but 1,250 to SAISD, that's a lot of students.
Yeah.
There's a lot of property in our school district, and maybe they have to move to another part of the city that
Sure.
where the cost of living is not as high for rents.
She said no.
Yeah.
I think we can maybe a lot, and I agree, there's a lot of maybes.
There's a lot of maybes.
Opportunity to maybe drill down a little bit and, because there's a lot of ISDs.
It is, Dr. Harrell, and again, that type of question and that type of detail, we're still looking into. I mean, Debbie's worked on that SAISD number, and probably, again, in a more detailed conversation, we can have more answers for it. I don't know if have any more to add to that, Debbie.
Those are transfer students that are reported by the receiving district as having an address in our district. So that's what's reported in the.
Oh, having an address?
Yeah, they live here and go there.
And historically, SAISD for over 20 years has taken employees, long before we could bring our own children. Like if you lived out of Northside, you can bring your children into Northside. SAISD was one of the first districts that allowed that for many, many years. So, and they're at all different ones. There's the Young Women's Academy, there's a Montessori program. When you look at the details, but as Ray said, we can address that in more detail in the future.
Okay. Trustee Freeman?
Yeah, that was going to be my question, and I assume that that's just like we see transfers to charters. These are students that are living in our district that are going to these specific.
That is what the campus
Reported.
service is reporting. So those SAISD numbers, SAISD is reporting the address as a valid address for Northside in the student systems.
Right. So I would, I lost my train of thought. That was one question. I'll come back to it. Go ahead.
All right, we'll still be here.
Next.
Wait,
trust-
let me just ask Debbie on that same topic. You said that they have Northside addresses, but they're living in Northside, but but that's not true of everything on here, is it? Because Isleta, that's El Paso.
So.
How can they have an address here and go to school?
Mr. Galindo told you that at the beginning that we know there are some inherent errors. If the receiving district doesn't update that information in a record. Some of the districts, like you'll see Fort Stockton, I brought that up as an example, we have a large number of students there. That's an online school program through a traditional ISD. So sometimes the districts don't look in our region, but there could be an online program or another reason. Or there could be the really small numbers that you see without a number, they're masked because there's a very small enrollment. So TEA doesn't want to make that student identifiable or the small number of students. Sometimes those could be errors in the very small numbers.
Thank you.
Trustee Duran?
I just have a question. This could be tabled, but we do exit interviews when students transfer. Do we ask them where they're going, and is that data applied to any of this data?
We don't currently. We did pre-COVID, and really it was Dr. Duran at, our request, and some parents did it and some didn't. What we found at the time, and we shared it with the principals at the time, that many were relocating and were happy with Northside. Some just really didn't want to fill it out and or had issues and so forth. And so as far as the validity, and it's been a while since I've been in the stats class, but I don't know how valid that was. And then COVID came and we stopped the exit interview that we used to do for families as they left us.
I would like to ask if we could, I don't know what the process is, if we can start asking again.
Yeah.
Just so that we can understand where our process improvements, if there are any, if it's personal, but if there's something we
Sure.
could have done to retain that family, that would be great. Thank you.
Trustee Freeman?
Yes, thanks. Mr. Galindo, so for that policy meeting, one thing that might be interesting to add just as a report as to which districts do have open enrollment, whether their entire district is open enrollment or if it's just at their specific magnet schools or in-district charters or anything else that they may have. And also a good opportunity for us to look at what schools that we have and if we I know some of our magnet schools had been open to other school districts. I don't know if we still have kids from other school districts attending our magnet schools, but it would also be that would also be helpful to have in a report.
Yes, ma'am, and yes, we
you.
do, and certainly we can add that to that
Thank you.
meeting.
Trustee Harrell?
I was going to kind of request the same thing that I do think we're probably, again, it's a maybe, that we're losing students. SAISD has some really good magnet schools. They have Cass Med, Cass Tech, ALA, and we know there's Northside kiddos there. It'd be interesting to see in our own magnet program how many we're getting from other campuses because we've had that kind of a compact. So that could also help us understand, should we look at something like open enrollment or tuition,
Certainly.
something like that. So, and then I just wanted to piggyback on what Carla said. Before COVID, we had been asking as a board to get exit. And you're right, reliability or validity may not be there. But if a kid says, I want to go to Cass Med in SAISD, we know that could be a piece of data that says maybe we need another medical magnet, something like that. Because some of it's going to help inform our next steps too. So if we could reinstate that, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah,
in
and
some
Dr.
shape or
Kraft,
form.
we've spoken about that, and even for the principal to know, what it is there a pattern as to why your students are leaving? So at the
Exactly.
time,
Thanks.
it was providing some of that information.
Yeah, and I would just add a couple of things to the conversation. And it used to be, well, Karen, Trustee, you pointed out really well that prior, when we had more transportation available, we had quite a good number of students going to health career and then business career that came from other districts. But there was a requirement, and if it's still accurate, that health careers used to have a certain percentage that had to be outside of Northside when it was established. So, so we have to be aware of that. Other thing is an open enrollment. Remember, that's not just a superintendent. That's sort of a trustee also. But I want to be careful that we don't assume that it's all district because it's not. We've had those conversations. Like you said, it is partial. I'd say 3 or 4 that I know because I know there's been dialogue with them about that. But I don't want it to get out that, hey, all these districts have an open enrollment and everybody has Northside students because we want to consider our relationships we have with other districts also.
Also,
Absolutely.
I've been able to save students at the exit interviews as an assistant principal because of some problems that we weren't even aware of. So I'm like, let's give us one more chance. And that's happened, a handful of those. So I think those just would be helpful for retention purposes.
And the last one I was going to bring up that's interesting to see too, although I know y'all giving all kinds of data, so don't worry about this part of it. I just did it for another reason. The demographics of the charters are pretty interesting too. You talked about Great Hearts and Bases. I haven't looked in 2 years, so I'd have to check. But Great Hearts, for example, was 40% Asian 2 years ago, and I think it's still that high. Bases was 30-something% Asian, their host group. But it's interesting, and you look at special education, who has and who doesn't. So it's also fascinating to look at the demographics too when we're looking at and talking about that information. Yeah. But Ray, you're not done yet. Trustee Harrell?
No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to suggest that, so this is half of Ray's story. Ray has another half of this story, which is average daily attendance, which you ask, again, why is this important? Because it's absolutely directly tied to the overall enrollment, but it's actually how we're funded, which is really a weighted average daily attendance. But it's not only the story of enrollment and what our campuses look like, but then also how good are we doing at getting kids coming to school, because that's also really important. So that's the second half of this.
So part 2, and still on bullet
Chapter.
number 1, though. I
Wait,
wanna
wait,
remind
I have one more thing.
Okay, all right, last one.
I have it written down.
I'm kidding.
So to Bobby's point, maybe part of policy could be that we do, because it's very public, we find out from our 1920 or 30 different neighboring districts who has open enrollment, who has tuition, and bring that to the table, because I think it's changing quite a bit.
Yes, and we can certainly look into that.
Thank you.
You bet.
You got one more. Trustee Lopez hasn't gone yet.
Yeah, Ray, this is gonna be quick, or maybe, and Karen, maybe this is a policy, discussion as well. So, you know, I know we lose our students to different campuses or to different districts. Do we have any data as to how many students come back?
Yes, and that.
Is that,
chart-
also, that's a part of this?
Right. Again, how accurate that is, Mr. Lopez, it's as good as the report. But the front part of that has the number of kids that we have had come to us
Okay.
from other districts. So yes, sir, there is some data on that.
But that go to a charter school or go to San Antonio ISD and then come.
Oh, then come back.
Yes.
That I don't
And then
know.
that would be interesting to know as well, as they may have left us
For a while. Mm-hmm.
elementary school or middle school, but then come back and then they go to a magnet program, right? So I don't know if you have access or availability to that data. That would be interesting as well, to kind of tell us where are they and what sides, what areas are they going to or coming from?
We can certainly look into that, and I think
You
we.
understand what I'm talking
Yes,
about,
sir,
right?
because what you described does occur, we know. So they leave us toward the end of elementary, middle school, or somewhere else, maybe a chart, and then they come back to us. Yes, that is a pattern that we do see, and I don't know if we can have that data. No, the experts are telling me it'd be hard to get that, but if they would come back to us, at some point, there are students, we'd have to have them back in our SIS, yes?
We can tell when they leave and when they come back, we just don't know where they go in between.
Okay, so there you have it. We wouldn't be able to identify what charter or where they went.
Well, aren't we making requests for student records at those previous campuses?
That you do, we make those requests for student records, but where you request it from is not something that's tracked in the SIS.
So does charter school not track them?
Well, they do track, well, when we make the request for records from the school that they're coming from, we don't, it's called the T-Rex system, and so we don't have a place in School Plus in our SIS to record where we're requesting that from.
It's a state system.
It's a state system.
It just gets a hit and then it sends you back again.
But yet, the system is different for them when they ask from us, right? But my point is, that would be
Yes.
information that we would be,
We-
that we could either get, or however we can look at it.
We can look into that, because the scenario you described, yes, we know, is very familiar, that they leave us school usually, Dr. Kraft and I have had a conversation, typically by high school, they come back.
Yes, and I was just gonna say anecdotally, we hear that they're coming back to high school, and if you go back to your very first packet, notice that we have a 4-year increase actually in high school. We're up 597 students, but we have our biggest loss in middle school. So many times they'll leave us at 4th or 5th grade, be gone in middle school, but they come back because what our high schools offer, there's no one offering what we can offer.
So then also, here's my second question. I didn't say I had a second question, so I apologize for that. So do we, and then, because we're talking numbers, right? We're talking dollars that go with the child, right? But
about to
I
talk
know we're not talking about
dollars, yeah.
But yeah, essentially, when that child leaves us, the money follows them, right? That's the law, or that's what's supposed to happen, or it occurs. Do we get any money that comes back when they come back to us? So if they come, let's say they go to a charter school, they come back, and I'm not picking on charter schools, I'm just using it as an example. They go back to the charter school, they go to the charter school, then they come back, does that money come back to?
Oh, absolutely. So we're
How much,
funded on.
but how much of that comes, and how much do they keep?
Yeah, so we're funded on a weighted average daily attendance. So depending on CTE courses and there's weights associated, but for every day they're in attendance, we receive funding.
Right, okay.
So yes, it follows the
So
student.
it follows the student, and they don't, there's no money being held back, if they were to go or come back to, there's no money being held, I guess, and,
Not to my knowledge.
okay, I was just
Renee,
curious, just to,
So now
I'm not insinuating
you're asking
anything.
a really interesting question that will be addressed here in the coming months as to, well, what then does a voucher ESA from a tracking system entail, particularly if students are deciding to take a voucher ESA and then, nope, didn't work out and come back. And so what is the
Right.
control mechanisms in and around that entire system? That was actually really a
Thank you.
great segue question. Because that has not been determined.
There you go, we got an opening.
All right, so part
All right.
two.
ADA.
So we have, we talked about enrollment, but now of these 101,000 plus students, getting them to school, being here at school every day, ADA. I'll direct your attention now to campus attendance for 5 years. This chart looks like this. And by the way, just as many questions as you had, which were all good ones for enrollment, you're probably gonna have twice as many for attendance, and again, probably a good policy conversation. I preface with that. So, if you look at Northside pre-COVID, and appreciate Adrian the way he did this. So, prior to COVID, you can see that our attendance, our ADA was 94.7. Okay, so of the 101,000 students or whomever at that time, however many students we had, 94.7 were the ones that we had and were receiving money that were coming to school. And again, you get into all the weighted ADA that was already mentioned. So you see then COVID occurs and we go to remote learning and you see an increase there. That was as a result of the leniency, if you will, the flexibility of how we can just check in and get attendance. Ms. Aldana's looking at me like, yes, I know what you're talking about. So that helped us, okay? So then we come back to the building, and as you've heard now at a national level, you see the drop, 21, 22, 91.6 we go down to from 96.5. However, the following year, 22, 23, you see us go to 92.8. And this year, we're at 93.1. And if you will, and you follow me to your right, you can see that the 1 year change, we see green. The 2 year change, we see green. So obviously from COVID, which is the last column, the last two columns there, you can see there's some heavy red there. However, we are on a good positive trend here that we hope will continue. Okay, and so similar to, and I'm not going to go into some of the schools, but again, at your leisure, you can look through and see some of the patterns with some of our schools. But this, again, high level gives you a perspective of how we're doing with attendance or ADA. So the question is, and it's been brought up before, so what are we doing about this? And again, not to get into a lot of great detail, but district level, a lot of good initiatives. We have Dr. Ridgely here, Whole Child, Kathy Lissy and Sassy, two departments that work with a number of resources. For example, communities and schools. They have re-engagement teams that work with families and students that are missing school. The Southwest Key program has a project outreach. They're again connecting our youth, our families with different resources in the community, trying to see what it is that they need to get them to school. We also work with the San Antonio Municipal Courts. We used to, way back in the day, as a vice principal, I used to go to attendance, truancy court, if you will. That's changed, but the municipal court system still works for us. They provide case managers that work with our families. They make phone calls. They help them fill out forms if they need some assistance. They make parent-school agreements, working with the schools. They work on mediation. So they've taken on a different role, but they're still involved with us as a district. And so that's some high-level intervention that we're doing there to kind of illustrate what we're doing from a district perspective, a community resource perspective, if you will. At the campus level, and this I won't do justice by talking about just a few examples, because this you do need a comprehensive list in a meeting to hear all the great things that some schools are doing and getting students in. Example, at Martin Elementary, they're the engineers over there. We're elementary, so the Martin Express, I call it, Suburbans. They go out and pick up kids every morning to make sure that they're at school. Families that need that assistance. Taft Raiders, they have the Raider Radar. So staff fill out forms and they turn it over to the student success advisors. They make phone calls. They talk to parents. They go out and visit homes. They work with the SAL, the student attendance liaison. So all of that's going on. Rudder does they call it a attendance fantasy league. They have students who's got the best attendance. They draft students and then they reward those with the best attendance. So it's not just, and certainly we all know this, that incentives are going to bring them in. It's happening and it's working to some level. But we've learned now it is also the whole child, kind of that whole wraparound service support that we need. And I say that because although our enrollment has gone down, the number of students, and I'm going to finish by going to the last two charts in your packet, the number of students that we have, you can say are some of the neediest. So direct your attention to special education. So you can see, and there again, green and red, high, low, by school, but top line, in the last 5 years, from 1920, this is snapshot data. This is what we have in the fall. We had 14,192 students. Over 4 years, we've gained over 2,000 special ed students, okay, to give you an idea of how that's trending, okay? The last package you have there, even higher, is bilingual or emergent bilingual students, EBs. In 1920, we had 10,575 on snapshot date. We've increased close to 3,000, 2,825 in 4 years. So you can see that the students that we have, the groups that we have, certainly are going to need more of our resources. Even though the enrollment has gone down, those populations have gone up. And so that's on us in terms of what we need to do to help those kids. And so that kind of illustrates, what we're dealing with in the schools, and in some part, I think directly related to attendance, in that they need more of our support. So.
Okay. Trustee Saldana?
Ray,
Yes, ma'am.
when you were talking about incentives, when we had student voice this past week, the kids brought up something very interesting, and I would like to ask, do we still require our teachers to post the lessons online so that if a student is absent from school, they can get online and get the lesson and the explanation and all of that?
I'm going to look to our CNI folks. I know there's some level in Schoology that is there for them, and in case they're absent, they can easily go back and
Well,
catch up.
students on a daily basis access, their technical tools. And so teachers have lessons that are planned, but they're not under the direction that they were back when we were experiencing COVID, where teachers had to have lessons posted at a certain time, especially when we were on the hybrid model, when some students were at home, some students were in school. But we see that as a double-edged sword, because we are very deep now into the use of Schoology and blended learning. And what has happened with some, especially secondary students, they think, why do I even need to go to school? I can do everything remotely. I can turn it in remotely. So since we began coming back in person, we've really emphasized, we say high tech, high touch, that when you have students all in a classroom, there shouldn't be lessons, like complete lessons that can be done where students aren't interacting with each other or interacting with the teacher. So that specific direction of you have to have this posted so students can access it remotely is not emphasized like it was back when we were doing the hybrid.
That was because we talked a little bit at Student Voice about attendance, and one kid looked at us and said, I'm going to be honest with y'all. The teacher has it online, so why come to school? They said the only ones that they really did not want to miss were their AP classes and dual credit. They said those, we know we have to be there, but our other classes, why, we don't worry about that. So that was eye-opening to us,
Yeah, we mentioned it this morning. That was articulated. This is a really complicated conversation as to what drives students to want to come to school. In many cases, it's extracurricular activities. In many cases, it's the pressure of, I cannot miss this class because I may have a test, that if I miss one, we heard this as well, if you recall, if I miss one class in an AP, say chemistry class, I'm almost certain to bomb a test. I will also say this, though, that there are a lot of variables that have shifted and changed since COVID. And we're seeing the effect of the online platform. We're seeing kind of this notion, and I think you had the opportunity, if you haven't, an article of what's kind of going on across the nation with this more or less family perception that school is almost optional at this point. Attending school is somewhat of an option, which was never really a notion prior to the 2019-2020 school year. And we can definitely try to dig in a little bit deeper. But like I say, the ADA really is from a budgeting standpoint, the crux of the conversation, because we can have 107,000 students back enrolled in school, but that's not to say that if we only have 93,000 in attendance, we won't reap the benefits unless our ADA is higher from an average daily attendance and a funding standpoint. I think it's also important to note, again, the shifting demographics, and we didn't talk about other programs like Newcomers program, but for example, special education, Tracy Warnley and her staff have done a pretty phenomenal job of not only tracking, this is PEEM snapshot data, by the way, so you got to go back to October, was it 30th? I think?
Usually in that area, 27th. I think.
End of October. That number, and I'll just use special education, is now at 16,800 as of when we meet today. Yeah, today. So that number's just continually ticking up. That's 600 students that qualify for services just as a result of October, end of October. And like I say, they've done a pretty phenomenal job of looking at, okay, well, what are the services that students are going to be receiving as a result of their qualification. So, I mean, we really are taking a very deep dive in looking at not only ADA, not only enrollment, but as important, what services do we need to make sure we're providing, i.e. staffing, in preparation to serve, like I say, a shifting demographic across the district.
Trustee Hall?
Yeah, I was just going to request maybe we talk about it at academics, because I know our area universities, we still use Canvas and we have online, and especially when students miss, they are owed those assignments, but nothing can make up what in person. And so most of the in-person courses that we teach, the in-person grading outweighs the online, but every student deserves to have the missed work in some shape or form, right, is kind of the philosophy. But I know there was a meeting with the area universities and colleges, and Alamo Colleges was there, and it really is talking about the blending of both, but the emphasis on in-person. And they don't have to worry about necessarily ADA, but we do. And we know that's a richer, more robust way of teaching. It's just that there's a way you can weigh it. So something to talk about at next academics. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Duran.
And I kind of want to just piggyback off Dr. Kraft, what your statement is about. In public school, we accept every person that comes through our door. And our numbers in special education increasing is something that the public needs to understand, that some of our smaller charter and private schools cannot service our students the way we can. I know, because I used to work in one, and we had to turn a lot of kids away because we didn't have the capacity to provide dyslexic services, to provide these specialized high-need students with what they needed to be successful. And guess who gets to do it? We do in public school. So this, if we could please make sure the public understands, if you have a special needs or a special service that your child needs, they may or may not be able to receive that in a private or charter school setting because of the cost to provide those services.
And I want to just real quickly piggyback off that note, because I think that's absolutely, Dr. Ann, a really important note, but I think it's also equally important to note that TEA and our legislatures have identified a $2 billion shortage in appropriately funding and supporting our special education students across the state of Texas in public education. So I think that is also worthy of recognition and for public knowledge, that while we're talking about putting together a budget and we're talking about absolutely meeting the needs of every student, it needs to be funded. and it's been recognized and acknowledged that we're $2 billion short, and that number, I can almost guarantee you, has only grown since that analysis.
Trustee Sedania?
Ms. Warnley, did you tell us that dyslexia is now in special ed, and that's why some of our numbers have grown? They've added that. Have they also added 504? No. So,
A student can be dismissed from 504 and tested for special ed and move in. Dyslexia is one of those areas. So if a student just needs accommodations, they can stay under section 504 as a dyslexic student. But if they're tested and determined that they need direct intervention, specialized instruction, then they become a special ed student.
so that's one of the reasons why our numbers have gone up. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Lopez?
No, thank you.
Okay. And I'll just add one other editorial comment to what's been stated, that we have to be cautious of. Remember, when we compare the major cities, Dallas, Austin, Houston, with the exception of El Paso, our demographics in San Antonio are different, as they are in Northside. And we continue to have an achievement gap, and we haven't really, and that's, I think, even actually getting wider per se. So in addition to some of the changes in our demographics, we've got to remember 70% of our population group actually still needs additional service for us to really address that achievement gap we have too. So we have to tell that story too, because that's been a long-term problem per se. So we have to remember that as we tell it too, to say, hey, we still got a group, very large group for us, unlike in Dallas and others, their percentage is lower, you know, if everybody's seen that. Only one is similar is El Paso historically. So that's a part of what we want to make sure the public and others understand too.
Great point. Okay.
Trustee Freeman?
I'm sorry.
Not yet.
We're not going to move.
So one other request, and this can come at a later time, Dr. Barajas. So at one point, some of us, when we've attended TASB Advocacy Institute, the Advocacy Institute in DC or whatever, we had gone to talk to our congressman regarding IDEA funding and the amount of IDEA that was promised, but they promised full funding and it's never been funded. But at that time when we went, so I had in hand the percentage of our kids, this was simplistic, but the percentage of our kids that were special ed, and then the percent of our budget that we spend on special education. It would be helpful in conversation to actually have some of that data and even teased out as to the percentage that is funded by the federal government and what we're not funded. Am I under the request? I think it would be helpful in advocacy to continue to talk about that.
And we'll break.
State, the federal, and us.
All of that.
We'll break that down, and then we'll also break down what we supplement locally out of the general fund. We'll have that as a part of the presentation for the next finance committee as well.
That would be helpful because it was a significant, I mean, if I remember correctly, it was like 12%. We have 12% special ed kids or close to that at the time, and 20% of our budget was going to for special ed services. So just that would be helpful.
That was a good transition over to the budget.
I think we're going to transition into chapter 2.
Quick comment though, Dr. Kraft, if you will, in your blue folders, all that, I know is a lot of information. For those of you that want to attend the longer unedited version of this conversation and policy, we ask that you, keep the documents and whatever questions you have. And Ms. Freeman, I'll get with you prior to the agenda so that we can cover all your questions. Right.
Can y'all do a quick favor on that one? Because I think everybody's going to be interested in that one, right? Sure. On the policy one? Yeah, just if we can, just sort of let everybody know in advance, hey, this is it, schedule it now.
So we have scheduled it for May the 1st.
Okay.
But there was an option of May the 1st and May the 8th. And at the time, I polled the people who were on that had signed up for policy. It might be at this time, I don't know if May the 8th is still available, but maybe we could look at that again.
Well, let's see if everybody can do
To accommodate.
What time, May 1st? We can look at that first.
Was it 4 o'clock?
You have 4 o'clock.
Is what it's scheduled where it's at now, if you can make it.
I'm good. Anybody else that wants to make it? What is it?
What time?
4 o'clock on May 1st.
What time?
They said 4 o'clock.
It was at 4 o'clock when we had scheduled it. If there's any leeway in accommodating more people, I know I don't know if May the 8th is still available.
Yeah, I think it is. We can actually, if you want to take a few minutes to look at your calendar as we're working through this, we actually have a calendar review,
I think what they're saying
a
is,
board review.
I think they're fine. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, we do have that part. Oh, I'm messing up the agenda. That's right. Thank you, Superintendent. We'll get back, come
So we
back,
can-
hold
we
that
can come
thought.
back. We got a full review of board
Yes.
calendar through graduations and summer
Absolutely.
leadership, and we can definitely
Right.
have that conversation.
Good point.
All right, so chapter 2. I say chapter 2. There are a few chapters to this presentation. So enrollment, attendance, ADA, obviously big drivers, but we also wanted to go ahead and start looking at what are, again, just as a reminder, the general fund budget assumptions. And we'll talk about the debt service and the school nutrition budget at the end, but obviously this is the big portion of the budget. So I'm going to turn it over to Renee and Tiffany Ferreras to talk through, like I say, the revenue assumptions and what we're currently looking at as far as, like I say, the big variables in putting together, starting to piece together a very draft skeleton fiscal year 25 budget.
So we always start with some assumptions regarding some drivers in the budget. In this case, we're looking at the revenue side. So we're looking at about maybe a 5% increase in property values. It used to be that meant more, but because we were under a revenue box now, if our values go up 15, 20%, it just means that our local taxes are going to go, tax rate's going to go down, because remember, we have a capital E entitlement, which is based on the number of kids that are coming to school. So the mixture of state and local funds is dependent on what happens to our property values. The property values go up more than 5%, it means our MCR, our maximum compressed tax rate, goes down. So that means the state is going to be sending us more. Where we are right now, 55% of our revenue in the general fund after budget amendment number 2 is coming from local taxes, and 42% is coming from the state. I think several years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago, we were that typical 66% from local taxes and about a third from the state. Well, compression is pushing that down. So with this next round, given the fact that we are going to see a drop in federal revenue, it could be that we are even Steven. 50% is coming from the state and 50% is coming from local taxes. So that might happen. Average daily attendance, I don't want to beat that dead horse, but right now we're starting at 93,500 only because the 6-week periods that we have seen this year are suggesting that that's probably a very conservative place to start. If we see anything that suggests we can go beyond that, 93,700, 93,800, we'll certainly take that into account. But unlike several years ago where you could pretty much guarantee that we would be at a certain 88 level, that's no longer the case. So going at 93.5 or 93.6, we just don't know. And so we have to live these grading periods at a time to see whether or not the kids are coming to school. Interest income, we put that there only because over the last several years, as we all know, interest rates have been extremely high compared to they were about 4 or 5 years ago. They're going to start to come down throughout this year. So we're going to go ahead and just be, again, conservative and assume that the amount of interest income that we are going to be receiving during the early part of the 24-25 year is going to be dropping because we expect the Fed to start to drop interest rates. And federal revenue, the superintendent alluded to, again, SHARs, we've talked about that a lot. So that's right now we have about a $19 million reduction in what we are looking at as far as budgeting for next year. The next 7 or 8 slides, please, are going to be really more of the gory details of the growth and improvement, going through what is growth, what's improvement, what's mandatory, and also what is coming over from ESSER, and we'll go through that over the next several slides for Ms. Contreras as well.
Okay, hello everyone. The next few slides will break out potential additional expenditures in 24-25 that were requested through our growth and improvement process that we have. In the last few weeks, enrollment projections were finalized and resulted in a net reduction, which you'll see on this slide, of 57.83 FTEs. We did break that down by level, just in case you were interested in that breakdown. And this is what a total reduction would account for about $4 million.
And Tiffany, just for clarification and to make sure this is really clear, these reductions are a result of attrition. You'll see the number of vacancies that we currently have and are anticipating to have as a result of retirements, resignations that we're already tracking. So this is not a reduction in force by any stretch. This is formula and student staff ratios, and so it is attrition. Nobody is losing a job.
Correct. So then we move on here to talk about the different categories in growth and improvement. So we start with the new school startup, the Jordan Middle School Magnet Startup. So this is where we allocate a position, the Magnet Director. And then later on in the year, we budget some salary costs for the counselor and secretary bookkeeper to start midway through in the year. So that represents the salary cost for the new school startup. And then on the new school base for Chumbley opening up in 24-25, and the Hobby Middle School Magnet is the new school base. That's the second year of budget and positions allocated for that campus. And so you'll see that breakdown is just over $2.1 million. And the number of FTEs for Chumbley is 34. And the breakout of the different types of positions that would be allocated next year is there on that slide. And then the Hobby Middle School Magnet is the program coordinator. So that is the total of new school startup and new school base. Okay. The fun ESSER slide. So this next group of costs represents those ESSER FTEs that will no longer be funded after September 30th, 2024. So what we did here was we broke up two categories. So you have your direct classroom support and your indirect support. The number of FTEs in those groups. I'm all in banking and accounting. And then also the total cost for those categories. So we break out in the first section the direct classroom support. So that is the pre-K expansion program that we were doing before the pandemic. And so we use the ESSER funds to continue that expansion, knowing that would come back into the general fund when the ESSER grant closed. And so in these bullets, you'll see the first, the second, and the third. So you have the pre-K teachers and instructional assistants, the ECSC teachers and instructional assistants, and the Learning Tree youth leaders and site leaders. So those three categories are related to pre-K expansion. So when you expand for the full day, you need the Learning Tree after school care. The difference there on Learning Tree is you'll notice the revenue offset comment there. When we expanded this in ESSER, we did not charge tuition for the Learning Tree, right? Because ESSER covered those expenses. And so now that we'll need Learning Tree at those campuses that were expanded and it's coming into the general fund, we'll have to charge tuition at those sites. And so you'll have a revenue offset to cover the cost of those 44 FTEs. I'm going to say EFTs all night now. Positions, yes, thank you. And so that $11 million doesn't include the cost of those 44 positions, but it does for the rest. So the pre-K expansion, the teachers and the instructional assistants, and also the BMC expansion that we did with ESSER funds. You have a question?
I do before we leave here.
Yes, ma'am.
So regarding our Learning Tree, where we didn't charge before and now we're going to be charging, does everybody know that?
They were informed, yes.
And
yes, we charge for Learning Tree we charge for Learning Tree, but at these campuses where we used ESSER funds to expand, so it was a total of 14 campuses or 14 sites, I believe. I don't know what the number. Those sites and those, they were not paying tuition up until now.
There must have been time where they had a one school.
Well, it's because the expenses were offset by the ESSER funds. So we didn't have to charge tuition.
How those schools were chosen.
It was the phase, so we had a 5-year plan for the pre-K expansion, and so those campuses were already selected before the pandemic, so we just continued that phase 3, 4, and 5, I believe, during the ESSER funds.
Trustee Freeman, or?
that was it.
Okay, Trustee Harrell?
So real quick, on the pre-K teachers and instructional assistants, I know we didn't get data that said, were there certain grade levels that lost more kids than other grade levels? But what I remember from some presentation we had is that we were really hurting at both ends, the pre-K end and then the high school end as far as student loss. So I guess the question is kind of two-part. Is that still going on? And do we still need that many teachers if we don't have that kind of enrollment anymore?
Well, and Adrienne, you'll probably have an exact answer. What I can tell you is it has bounced back in a beautiful way, because you're exactly right. Even when we came back to school, parents kept their littles at home, and but we're seeing tremendous growth in pre-K and ECSE.
Good.
And also to expand on that, these allocations year after year will be included in the projections that resource planning does. So these won't necessarily stay each year. It'll be dependent on what we project enrollment to be.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Real quick question. And this is around, when we talk about our $11 million, or actually just in the pre-K teacher and instructional assistants, when we're talking about 144.5 full-time employees, do we have a breakdown as to which ones are teachers, how many are teachers, and how many are instructional assistants?
We do. It is.
And do we have that
could
for
probably
all
pull
of
that up.
those 4 sections? Those,
Yes, we have that breakdown. Yes, and we can.
and they're
provide-
currently filled right now?
These are filled positions
Right.
unless there was a vacancy in the year, but they're active current positions with people in them. Yes.
So Mr. Lopez, at 72.5 teachers.
For which
and,
one?
For
number
the-
one?
For pre-K.
How many? What
Yes,
was it again?
sir. 72.5 is what we have listed here, and 72 for the instructional assistants.
Okay. What about early childhood? Do we have those?
Yes, yeah, let me pull it up.
Those are 21 for the teachers and 38 instructional aides.
Behavior and mastery?
11 and 11.
Look at Jake, beat me.
And then learning? 44, but they're all just like, all like different across?
Yes, it's leaders and site
just like
leaders. So there's more youth leaders than there are site leaders.
Okay, so.
Okay. Going through the indirect support, so there are a total of 37 positions there. The middle school student service facilitators, 21 FTEs positions, I'm just going to say positions, clinic assistants, AVID coordinator, and then the ADSI turnaround coordinator. So that's a total of 37 positions at just over $2.3 million. And so I do also want to note that the line items with the asterisks are the campus-based units. So that's something that you'll see at a future board meeting for approval. We usually bring the campus-based units for approval first so that HR can start hiring for those campus-based units. And then when we finalize the growth and improvement package to its entirety, then you'll see those non-campus-based units and other costs.
Okay, Trustee Lopez?
On the clinical assistants, do we know which campuses that they're at right now?
We have that
Or
breakdown. Yes.
is this something that they're asking for, or currently that they are there?
Right, so
Okay.
every position on this slide is
Is
the
currently
current
in-
active position with people in them.
Okay, so do we know what campuses those are at?
We have that breakdown, yes, sir, we can provide, I don't know that off,
So we're gonna shift for these particular clinic assistants, they will shift to middle schools with enrollment over 1,000 and elementaries over 1,000 as well. 'Cause right
I'm sorry, repeat that again, I couldn't hear you.
So for these 14 clinic assistants, they'll be used to support middle schools with over 1,000 students because we just have one RN there, and then our elementaries that are over 1,000.
Okay. Do we know what they're currently doing right now as well? I mean, they're clinically, so they're giving like basic services and stuff like that.
Yeah, and
You know, I'm just curious.
I think that that's also a really just important note. These are supplanted positions. I'm going to use the term supplant. So these would normally be funded without ESSER funds, using general fund. We've used ESSER funds in preparation to spend down what was the total number, 178?
173.
$173 million prior to the September 2024 suspense date. And so now we're in a position of looking at fiscal year 25, moving these current positions that are in most cases
We're gonna absorb them.
filled back into the general fund.
Yeah, we're gonna
This is
absorb
the painful part. Yeah.
Yeah, will that be something that we could look at when it comes to the policy, or what would it, where would that come? Would that go to a policy or finance committee?
As far as a greater breakdown as
the
the
breakdown of
positions,
those,
yeah, we can
yeah.
definitely bring that to the next
Cost.
finance committee.
Okay. Yeah, just to kind of get an understanding of where those services are being provided, and so that way we understand, hey, we're not gonna, we're gonna maintain that, and we don't lose any services, right, or potential. I mean, I just want to make sure I get to see that in a visual perspective.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Trustee Sadai?
I just want to remind my colleagues that when the ESSER funds were given to us and we make decisions to have these pre-K teachers, instructional assistants, and what have you, we also said it's possible that this is a temporary position and that if they're working really well, we'll consider putting them in the budget. But this doesn't mean that all these positions are going to stay in the budget. It's going to depend on the overall when we get ready to do that. So I just want to remind y'all that this was all icing on the cake. It wasn't meant to stay permanent unless we could afford it.
And yes, that will be future decision points, and really, to fast forward to the end of the presentation, you're going to see what we're currently looking at in regards to the whole storyboard, in regards to a deficit type situation, and that's really the intent of this entire conversation, is how did we get to this number?
Right. And to clarify, because I think Ms. Freeman is about to ask this maybe, so the...
How did you read my mind?
So the bottom section, these positions did not exist before ESSER. And so these were completely created except for AVID. I apologize. AVID did exist before, but the other three did not. And then the pre-K expansion, of course, those didn't, but that was already an approved expansion program that we were planning to use general fund dollars for. We just used ESSER to do that.
Thank you. I was going to ask which ones were supplanted and which ones were
Yes, ma'am.
in addition. Thank you.
So that distinguishes your light, because you pressed it twice.
Yes, sir. I think it answered my question.
Okay. 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 So this slide represents additional positions being requested through the growth and improvement process. And so we have special education teachers and instructional assistants, bilingual ESL and language support teachers. And so that is 127 positions at $6.9 million. And then that was direct classroom support. And then but indirect support, we have the special education campus coordinators and a fuel manager, which are 8 positions at just over $500,000. And these, the top 2 would be included with the campus-based units for approval at a future board meeting. Okay. And so after we talk about all these additional or potential positions, we wanted to pause and just bring up the vacancies, the current vacancies that we have, and with our teachers. So we have 153 general ed vacancies and 93 special ed vacancies.
Yeah, and I'll just go ahead and reiterate, our challenge is we do have some critical shortage areas. We're having a hard time filling bilingual, but we are having a really difficult time, as is most school districts, in fact, all that I know of, and spoken with special education vacancies. This 93 is current vacancies. This does not include what you just saw proposed to meet staffing guidelines and request as a result of students to be served. So we've got a lot of work cut out for us this summer.
Trustee Freeman?
Yes, so to that point, so these are our current vacancies, and this was figured into last year's budget, meaning that this will go, this gets rolled over again to, this helps our deficit in a way.
It does. We have a vacancy factor in the current budgeted. And so, if you yes, to answer your question, aside from the substitute associated cost for covering classes, that vacancy in the aggregate, it
Still helps
has
our-
a compiling effect, obviously.
Still helped our deficit, but we're gonna carry these because our intention is to
We
try
need to fill
find
these
them.
positions.
Okay.
But we'll talk about that here in a second. Can you read my mind?
I'm not that good.
Oh, can she? I hope she can.
Okay.
You're doing great, Tiffany.
So this next slide lists the various costs that are currently funded with ESSER funds. And so this is the top section are payroll costs. They're not salary, they're not positions, but it's extra duty pay and or stipends that have been covered with ESSER funds. So that these are the requests to continue these in 24-25. And then the ESSER other costs, this is just the stuff, the other additional things that we used ESSER funds to purchase that would need to continue in 24-25.
All right. Trustee Harrell?
So real quick, I thought Schoology was free, and the second question I had was that I don't remember what Z-Space is.
So they roped us in, they roped everyone in. Schoology was free. It's no longer free. And the different, just like iStation was free. You're gonna see that iStation is no longer free, and everyone in the state uses it. So Z-Space is a whole suite. Is Chris Trejo here in case I misspeak? Oh, good, yes. I'm looking, I can get the whole technology piece, I can, so Z-Space is a technology solution that we're working with grade 6th, 7th, and 8th grade science students. It's augmented reality, which is a little different than virtual reality. But the idea, that's one of many things students do, but it makes science come alive. They go through a heart. They create all kinds of things in such a way that really helps them with the new science essential knowledge and skills. And then I'm gonna, Deanna or Chris, if there's anything y'all wanna add to it.
Yeah, Dr. Hall, they're essentially laptops similar to what you all have in front of you. They're called Inspires. They're a little heavier duty. With ESSER dollars, we've purchased a set of 24 plus a charging station for all our middle schools. And it really creates, if you can imagine in the space here with a stylus and a student, like Dr. Jordan mentioned, a heart or a dissection, and kids can actually rotate the image in 3D in a simulated virtual environment, take it apart, see how blood flows through the heart as an example. It's really innovative technology, could not have happened without a partnership with Chris's team at all. And so we are just stepping into that space, even though ESSER dollars paid for that. It's really kind of 21st century learning skills in all of our middle school science classrooms.
Yeah, and I'll just say it because I've seen it. You know, it's one of those that, I'm not biased against any of these, but that's definitely one that you say, hey, what's the benefit of having extra dollars to learn new things and how they can really give you an advantage to some extent, and that's definitely one of them. It's very impressive.
No, I was just going to add, the only thing that I would say is as good as Z-Space was Deanna teaching in the classroom. A great science teacher.
Trustee Saldana?
Have we done research on whether the elementary math and reading interventions are working?
So as the mic is going to Patty, so this is specifically two programs that we use for Tier 2 and Tier 3. They're not used for Tier 1 instruction, so they're intervention. The funding source is state compensatory education. Well, of course, we know that's part of general fund, but this is state comp. That's the proposal. And Dreambox is mathematics, and iStation is for reading. So as I'd mentioned, iStation used to be provided to districts. And so we have very high usage rates, and so I'll kick it to Patty.
Very high usage, so we're monitoring monthly usage reports and sharing that with the campuses. These are also used primarily for, of course, reteaching, but also for the House Bill required 1416 for students who may have not passed STAR or need accelerated intervention. That's when these programs kick in and help students in closing the gaps.
But have we seen that it's working? Have our scores gone up? Has the reading gone up?
Yes, ma'am. So just like we saw last night, we were working with the North Side leaders, where we saw from, just as measured by STAR, students in 2023 outperformed every tested area in reading, math, also in science and social studies from 22 to 23. And we look consistently at our MAP data, our beginning, end of year, our beginning and middle of the year, and we compare it not only from beginning to middle, middle to end, but we compare it from middle this year to last year. And we are seeing student achievement growth.
Especially in math,
Thank you.
we're seeing double-digit gains in math.
And lastly, this is the remaining other costs, additional costs for the general fund. It's about, the four items listed here represent about 71% of that 3.3 million, just to give you some context. But utility increase and supplies and equipment costs just to keep the operations of the district going.
Yeah, these are really the inflationary pressures that I described earlier. The maintenance contractors, supplies, equipment. Unfortunately, again, looking at some of our vacancies, in particular skilled trades, we're having to contract a lot more work out, plumbing, electrical, et cetera, and it's obviously expensive.
So on here, this is the.
I'm sorry, real quick,
No, go
Trustee Harrell?
ahead. No, go ahead.
The slide before, real quick, Enrichment Academy, did I miss, what is that?
So that's cable in Westwood Terrace. Yes. So adding a day of enrichment on Wednesday and 20 some odd additional days.
And then it's almost $500,000 for Schoology. And so I'm just wondering, when we talk about it in academics, if it's not being used with integrity in some shape or form, maybe we can talk about that to see. Do we want to continue that? Would we rather go back to Google Docs or something? I don't know, but a lot of
I can say this, that it is absolutely being utilized at the secondary level.
Let me look at Jerry Dion.
And I'm talking about the learning management system, Schoology. I think that making that shift, we would need to have lots of runway, like a year it's going to expire, because, well, it's everything from not only makeup work, but grades.
Assessments are in it.
Yeah.
Well, what we can do is we and I think that would be a great report to make. How are campuses use what are the requirements? Because we have certain requirements from the district that, everybody needs to have. And then we've got some, really power users. But as a learning management system, it's a standard learning management system that's used everywhere.
Okay, so the cost of all of this summarized in one slide here. So all of these costs that we just went through would comes out to just under $26 million. You can see the total FTEs by category there, and so the big ticker is, of course, the ESSER positions. Coming to the general fund is that 306.5, and of course a graph that shows you that total. And I think.
Okay, so So that covers the additions that are currently being bandied about, whether or not they would be included in the budget for next year. But let's look at if we did include these, what would happen. So the change to the projected deficit, so the deficit for 24-25. So we know that after budget amendment number 2, the current budget, we are standing at about a $50 million deficit. So if we walk this deficit forward, taking into account all the variables that are currently in this year's budget, we add back $6.8 million because that was a one-time expense that was recognized in budget amendment number 2 for the video boards and things like that. So that won't occur in 24-25. So we added back. But we talked about the decrease to revenue, and then the 25.889, which does reconcile to the recap. So that takes us to an $84 million deficit if we were to include all the items that we covered in detail, FTEs and positions and things like that coming forward. And this is before we even consider, usually the biggest cost driver of any budget is pay raises. So, which we can then, if you want to see that number again, stare at it for a bit. We've been staring at it all day.
Yep. So, and again, we are not alone in this camp. In fact, we were just talking about some of the surrounding districts, larger districts, $60, $70 million deficit budgets. You know, the continuity of instruction designated fund very diligently has been set up, structured to really what I consider wean off of ESSER. But we've got to be really careful. And this is the part of the conversation that's the short-term analysis and outlook, and then the longer-term analysis and outlook. You know, again, it's so hard to project what could potentially happen in January and thereafter, i.e. the 89th legislative session. And so if we're going to start making transitions and we're going to start looking at programmatic changes, we haven't discussed, obviously, a reduction in force. I don't know that anyone has technically had a board-approved reduction in force implemented yet, but I anticipate that it is forthcoming. I mean, now is the time to have these conversations. In conjunction with, really, the next slide that does include a general pay increase. And these are just scenarios. This is not, again, a recommendation at this point, more or less a talking point, because this would be in addition to what has been proposed at that $83 million plus mark. I do think that it's important that we try to stay, and I've mentioned this earlier, as competitive as we possibly can. We are not alone in the sense of experiencing critical shortage vacancies, particularly bilingual, special education, but also core content areas. I believe right now we're working on with the retirement notifications that we've received, trying to hire 19 secondary English teachers, if I remember correctly, that number's correct, for next school year. It's been a long time since we've had that kind of shortage in the subject of English, but that's...
And that's everywhere, too. Every district is, we're in the same boat.
Yeah, that's the environment that we're navigating. So I don't want to dismiss the importance of remaining as competitive as we possibly can and can afford from a compensation standpoint. This is obviously a much larger, deeper conversation as well, but we did want to go ahead and provide these scenarios, a 1%, a 1.5%, and a 2% general pay increase, just so you have this information. The other piece of this conversation, which again, now we're getting into really more like the 80,000-foot view, is it's really important, I believe, when we recommend and propose a budget, to be able to pinpoint, here is what the percentage of the budget that we are proposing to spend on payroll-related expenses, i.e. recurring expenses, and then all other expenses. The ratio ranges, depending on the size of the district, usually between 85 and 88, 89%. We've got to be really careful that the payroll expense percentage does not exceed 90%. That is a really important percentage that probably any school finance guru will tell you, really watch that number. And again, part of it is contingent upon the size of the district, because there are other related expenses as you get smaller that are going to push that number down to like the 83, 82, 84% range. But that's a number that we're really keeping a close eye on. So Tiffany and Renee have already projected out and included an assumption of a 2%, which would land us at the 87.98, 88%. But that's an important figure that I'll highly recommend and probably revisit, keep a close eye on.
You had Trustee Freeman?
Yeah, I'm backtracking. Dr. Barajas, the $50 million deficit from from this year that you have in that piece, or 50.9, does that include the fact that we didn't hire those FTEs? Did that bring that back in? That doesn't include any forecast in budgets in the sweep, or?
Yeah. So that's what we wanted to discuss. So if we can go forward to
I'm sorry, thank you.
to this slide. Okay. So over the last several years, what we have been trying to do, somebody mentioned that they look like the eclipse things. I didn't realize that when I was putting this together to explain this. So essentially, the one on the left, it's an annular eclipse because you can still see the budget on the outside. That's the outside ring, right? And the difference between the inside ring and the outside ring is the difference between actuals and budget. So what we are trying to do is to bring those two concentric circles on top of each other, meaning that when we present a budget to this board for adoption, that is our best estimate of what we actually think is going to come in revenue and what our expenses are going to be. The sweep, the term that Northside uses, and other districts use fallout, fluff, whatever you want to call it. We don't want to bring to you a budget that is inflated with expenditures that are never going to incur. So for instance, if the board were to approve all of the positions, the full-time equivalents through the CBUs, campus-based units, and non-CBUs later in the year, we know that we're not going to include those dollars in the budget that you're going to adopt in August, because the chances are is that HR is not going to be able to hire those positions. So why inflate the budget with a dollar that is sitting there that's never going to be expended? So at the same time, going back to our scenarios of this, so a 1% raise to the general fund right now is, we are estimating 8.5 million, but we need to refine that number because we know we have vacancies. A person who is not here is not going to get a raise. So we need to budget around, if our vacancy rate is going to remain static, and it has over the last, because we get a report every month of how many positions are vacant. HR provides that to us. We don't want to over budget, because if we say the sky is falling and at the end of the day it comes out that it's not as bad, well, it strains, credulity for us to say that, oh, well, it's going to be a $100 million deficit. It was only 20 million. We can't do that because, again, the board has to make decisions along with the superintendent regarding the package that we're putting together. So year after year, we've been getting those circles tighter and tighter because, again, aside from something that happens during the year, like we want to go out and buy, add positions because of the needs of the students, outside of things like that happening, the budget is pretty tight around what we think we're going to spend, because right now in the general fund, I think we probably have about between a 7 to 9% vacancy rate across all positions. So when we put the budget together, we're going to step back, and to your point, all the positions that you've approved may not necessarily, the dollars won't be in the budget because you've heard from HR, there's nobody out there. We can't get these positions filled, so why add money to the budget? Now, if HR comes in and says, we are hiring left and right, we have a budget amendment process. We can increase the size of the budget to account for that. But I want the board to understand that we are not, that for every single position that you may or may not approve, the dollars won't necessarily be in the adopted budget. It would be foolish for us to do so because we've seen that we can't fill every position. So the number of vacancies that we currently have, and the $50 million deficit. The $50 million deficit is based on budget's assumptions about where we're going to end the year, taking into account vacancies as well. So the $50 million, I'm looking over at Jake, we're pretty solid that that's what we think the deficit is going to be for this year.
I guess if I can follow Trustee Freeman's question. So if we looked at the last 2 years, I know you said it's getting tighter, but what percent or how close were we the last couple of years?
We're putting Hall of Fame numbers up every year because we're at 1.5%.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're at $1 billion and we may miss it by $15 million.
Nice.
You know, we're in the Hall of Fame, but to a board, you may say, oh, $15 million, that's a 2% raise. We could have given a raise to our staff. So you have to look at it in the context of $1 billion budget and we missed it by 15 million, you know, that kind of thing, so.
Good, okay. All right, moving on.
All right. So we have,
So,
two more aspects.
okay, so, yes.
These are a little bit less cumbersome.
Was it-
School nutrition and debt service.
For the two new board members, in August, you will be considering for adoption 3 funds that are mandated by law. The general fund, the one we've been talking about ad nauseum, child nutrition, food service, and then the debt service fund, which is the fund that we use to pay back all of the bonds. So child nutrition, just a couple of bullets here regarding what we are looking at in child nutrition. We're going to continue the 76 CEP campuses, which essentially means the kids there eat for free. So that number is not going to go down, and right now we don't expect that number to go up. But so we're going to maintain the 76. And because this is usually important, there is going to be no increase to student paid meals for next year. And we haven't had an increase in over 8 years, so that'll remain the same for next year. Child nutrition is going to be fine. They're not in the same budget crunch that the general fund is, so they'll be okay. Debt service, the other fund that the board will consider for approval, we are going to recommend that the INS rate of 0.3355 remain the same for at least 1 more year. That, depending on what kind of property value increases we see, will allow us to continue to pay off our high interest credit cards, essentially, right, to pay off our debt faster. At 3355, we'll be able to make all of our scheduled debt payments of 166 right now, and again continue to layer in additional debt because we are still selling bonds from the 2018 and 2022 bond programs.
Okay.
So I was told you would never be able to navigate that in under 2 hours. An hour and 47 minutes. So,
You lost?
so that's a lot. That was a lot of information.
Ray, see how it's done?
A lot of information.
Private.
Well, no, and I do want to thank Renee, Tiffany, Jake, and really the entire cabinet. They've gotten to hear this twice, maybe 3 times, as we're working this process, and it's still very much early on. But I felt like the board needs to be able to start digesting this information, particularly given the circumstances that we're having to navigate with this particular fiscal year budget. I mean, it's obviously not ideal. I wish there were a whole lot more highlights and additional revenue streams that we were able to interject into this particular budget, but this is going to be a tough one. So we'll have the opportunity, like I say, at the upcoming Finance Committee to take a deeper dive. We've got some questions and data to bring back to that meeting, as well as policy and academics. Like I say, the Finance Committee has been scheduled and will be on the 22nd, April 22nd, and then we'll have a follow-on on April 23rd as well. So if you have questions in between now and then, this is a great opportunity to, like I say, fire them away at me, and we'll try to have answers going into either one of those meetings.
Yeah, and I'll pass on. I know we got the calendar coming up next, but I guess if I can say on behalf of the board, really appreciate everybody's effort on this one. There was a lot of information that we'd also requested, the data that y'all shared and provided, blue folder, online, and everything else is extremely valuable. So, and it's going to help us all out greatly. So appreciate it. And Trustee Saldana?
Renee, the meeting for the Finance Committee is April 22nd. Are you going to have fiesta dinner for us? That's the night of the parade.
We'll see what we can arrange.
No. He's in charge of that meeting. He's.
Get some old Nelly dogs.
All right, Trustee Harrell?
No, I think it helped. I don't remember we had this much staff last time, but it was nice to have the experts in the room. So we appreciate y'all too. Thank you.
All right, so Trustee Saldana started the transition already, but we're now on the next agenda item. If everybody's okay on the calendar.
Yeah, thank you all very, very much. They really have, like I say, spent probably over half their day looking at fiscal year 25 and budget and programming. So very much appreciated. Okay, so as promised, we wanted to take a look at all of the events ahead, and this is a busy time of the year, as you're well aware. We had some great events and great success across the district on Saturday, and I anticipate that that will be the case until the middle part of June. So I'm going to go ahead and draw your attention to the big spreadsheet because this is really probably a much better vantage just from the aggregate of what we have ahead. The darker gray, and this one actually I believe is gray, but the dark.
You're not gonna
Sorry.
live
The darker gray are obviously events that we've covered, we've navigated. So beginning on April 10th, I'll just highlight some. We have Zachary's magnet induction. Thursday is a NEF donor appreciation night on the 11th. We have on Tuesday at 10 a.m., this is the Northside ISD retiree luncheon at NAC, if you're able to attend it. And of course, I'm not hitting everyone. We'll have our second group of Student Voice students also at the Activity Center on the 18th at 11:30. And this last meeting was really, I'm glad to know that they want to try to meet one more time, because I don't know if I was ready to say goodbye before graduation to the students. So if you have the opportunity, it's really a great opportunity to engage with soon-to-be graduates. The new John Jay High School Auditorium will have a ribbon cutting on Thursday, April 18th at 6:30. If you can, come join us out at Gus Stadium for the solar car races on April 20th. Again, Business Finance Committee we have currently scheduled for the 22nd at 4 o'clock, along with Fiesta dinner. The 23rd, again, regular board meeting, and we do have some other items that we need to, like I say, cover with administrative teacher contracts and, like I say, some things beyond, obviously, fiscal year 25 budget. On April 30th, we've got a clinical teacher celebration. This is actually Dinah Ely's department, but this is our effort to recruit and train and prepare the next generation of what I used to call student teachers. They're clinical teachers, and so this is another great opportunity to convince them that they do, in fact, need to come to work for best district in the state. We've got a policy committee meeting on the 1st. Now, I think the question was asked, do we need to try to look to change that to the 8th, or do we want to leave it as scheduled?
Yeah, if I understand.
I can do the 8th.
I thought everybody could do the 1st, right? Could you do the 1st? But it was just a time. Yes, it
I
doesn't matter.
think Carol was out on the
Yeah.
1st.
Well, you're out because of the.
That's Wednesday, right? I teach Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, either way, it's a problem. It's the 8th, the same problem.
Okay.
So it's a time issue, right?
I think Carla was asking if we could move it to 4:30.
Yeah, that's what I
I'll
mean.
be a little late,
I mean, it's a time issue more than it is a,
30 minutes.
Okay, so keep it on the 1st,
if you can.
but look to move it.
I'll do it to the 1st, I'll make it to.
But you can do the 8th?
Well, yes, because their final is on the 1st.
Oh, I missed that.
On the 8th.
Okay.
Don't change it for me. I can catch up.
So we just want to propose a 4:30.
I guess if everyone can come on the 8th, then let's just change it to if that's still available. Did I hear the 8th still works?
If I can interject just for a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
On Kelly's behalf, she did get Steve Allison to come to that meeting.
Thank you.
I can change the time, but I would like an opportunity, if that's the case, if we're going to change it to the 8th, to give him a heads up on Kelly's behalf. So let me know what y'all are going to decide on so that we can.
So I guess if he is available, can we just?
I'll just need to check with him.
Yes, okay, well, let's do that.
All right, let us get back to you. It sounds like we want to try to move it to the 8th.
And 4:30 is better?
Yeah, so I can be a little late.
4:30.
4:30? Okay. One of the items that we need to bring forward at this meeting, or like I say, are the proposed resolutions. We need to
Sure.
start taking a look at those. We'll have at least a draft.
Thank you, Monica, for bringing that up.
You're welcome.
So are we, to be clear, holding on May 1, 4:30, and see if he can make it on the 8th, then
Yeah.
we'll make it official?
And then we'll communicate, as soon as we hear back from Representative Allison, he can or cannot make it. If he can, then we'll look to change it to 4:30 on May 8th.
Okay.
Okay. All right. The HEB and Excellence in Education Awards Banquet is in Houston this year, and it's on a Sunday. And of course, these are our teachers that have been recognized. So, like I say,
Yeah, let's do it if we can, because if not, I'll get in trouble for not following through.
Okay.
How many are gonna be able to make that HEB and have a plus?
I will be there, but I don't have to sit, I mean, the judges sit
You
at
don't wanna
another
sit-
table.
okay.
So if we don't need to, I might have misspoke about having a table there. I think were always doing us a favor, because not all districts get a table like we do, which has been very nice, but.
Is that at our own expense?
Once the extra is, they always give us 2 tables. So right now,
Will that be at our own expense? Because this is not budgeted.
Jill told me a little
We could put
different,
on the
that
agenda to
she's
get
always just
approved
been overly kind
for
to
travel.
Northside, but not every district who has teachers in the finals gets a table. So, but I'm going for sure. So if that helps anybody make that decision whether we have a table or not.
We'll have a district administrator there. I have some meetings on Monday in Austin that I have to be at. So I probably will not be personally in attendance, just knowing that from Houston to Austin's gonna be a pretty tough trip.
And if it helps that we don't get,
Thank
if
you,
we don't have to pay or we don't get a table, the district person could be my +1, because my husband would much rather go see the Astros play. Which is, he just noticed that they're playing the same time the thing is, so.
Okay, so
It's just a thought.
we'll coordinate with
Thanks.
Dr. Harrell.
Yes, Monica Falconberry definitely needs to know the head count, so if you can please email her
Well, no, we
or
can-
myself.
Let's do it now.
Well, let's
I
do
mean,
it.
let's
I
just
would
do
love
it.
that, yes.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like
Got to
anybody's,
know.
yeah,
I can't go.
yeah.
Well, I don't know.
All right. You got 5 minutes. No?
It's that my daughter had told me put down May that weekend, 5th and 6th or 4th and 5th, what, she said, and she won't tell me what it is.
Okay.
So let me call
So
her
we got-
tonight
all right, so we got
and
correct-
see,
so we-
you know, if it's gonna really involve Sunday.
All right, David? Karen?
No.
So we just waiting, huh?
Okay, yeah.
Carla? Yeah,
At this time, I can, I
okay.
have a.
So just be, I mean, depending on what I do, but just Corinne has to decide. We know Carol, we know your status. Just be
I would
Corinne
like
if I need to go.
Because I think
Okay.
with us having 4,
Yeah.
that's.
No, it's a, I hate to miss, I just
Is that a Friday or? I forgot.
Sunday.
got
Sunday.
Oh,
important one.
That's right.
The judging's always on Friday.
I'll come back that night, drive back, have to be at work.
Okay, so what we'll
Okay.
do, by morning time, right? You
I
will know
I
about,
will let her know.
yeah, about Corinne and I status.
you
I'll
know
look too.
tomorrow.
I think I am.
Talk to my boss.
Okay.
Janice,
Now, the other,
I'll go to
the other
All right.
one I have a list on.
Okay, sorry.
The John Jay ceremony. How many were able to attend the John Jay? They need a individual.
Mayor just wanted to know who was gonna be attending.
Yeah.
What day is that?
The John Jay
The
cutting
18th.
ceremony.
I'll let Gerald.
Thursday the 18th.
Okay, I'm
Yes, I'm a yes.
out of town.
Anybody else?
Bobby, there was another one that we passed up that, April the 25th, the department visits.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah,
We're gonna do the IT or?
we're
Yeah.
gonna go to Kelly Smith first?
yeah.
Okay,
Okay, that's good.
Diana Ely wanted to know what
Yeah.
time.
it's at 1 o'clock,
For
right?
her.
We're gonna meet at
1 o'clock.
Kelly Smith.
Yeah, at 1
1
o'clock,
and then we'll
yeah.
go
That's
to
the,
NAC.
which one is, that's a technology one?
Yeah, yeah,
Technology.
yeah. We don't wanna go later than that, cause you're gonna get out there late, no, 1
Oh,
o'clock.
yeah, that traffic is bad.
But Diana, yeah, so just an estimate as to when we would go to NAC.
1 o'clock.
NAC, no,
You just said,
NAC would be.
Oh,
after.
oh,
No,
after.
just said Kelly, yeah.
My bad.
at-
2:15.
I'm showing Kelly Smith and then the Activity Center.
Oh, okay. All right,
Is
so
that
we're
too
gonna-
late?
No, I think that's
Okay.
fine.
Should be okay.
I think 1 and then 2:15,
Okay,
just
I'm
because.
sorry, Dr. Kraft, it's just that since he was going back over some other ones.
Okay.
We have another.
That was my list.
No, another one.
Oh, right.
We've been invited to the, help me, Carol, the same day as the CIS luncheon.
Oh, the women's.
Oh, yeah.
There's a battered women's shelter,
The battered women's shelter's been the women that are invited.
the women on the board.
Right.
No offense to anyone.
Yeah. So we also have a Insight Mentor luncheon that day. We were just talking about it earlier. If we can try to divide and conquer.
Insight and CIS and the battered women's?
Yeah, and the Insight
Well, we're gonna
Mentor-
need to know who's going where.
I
It
would
doesn't,
like to go to battered women.
Okay.
I want to go to CIS.
I will go wherever,
You put me down.
Yes,
honestly.
I was planning on going to the Mentor Mentee luncheon.
Oh, there we go.
Which one is it?
So we should be,
Okay.
and if you want to attend others,
Will you eat with my mentee then?
absolutely.
Okay.
Well, they eat with me, it's really,
Carol, can you send me the names?
So I guess I'm, you're going to the battery, so I'm a whatever? I mean, I don't need to even out anything, right?
How did y'all get the other invite? I hadn't seen that one.
By email?
Oh.
Well, the CIS one was, I think we've had, but the.
Oh, the CIS, yeah.
Yeah, the battered women
Yeah.
came, because it's a Mother's Day celebration.
And it's
so
the
they
first
did it
annual.
Mother's
I
Day.
think it's
No, we had it
no?
last year.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
On the
CIS.
same day as CIS.
No, it's a Mother's Day. Okay.
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 We've got a few more, bear with me.
All right.
So we have the Partners of the Year award ceremony on May 9th. And this is this is the NEF Partners. And then May 14th, called board meeting. Okay. On the 22nd, this is our retirement ceremony celebration. May 28th, another board meeting, and then we start graduation. So Thursday, June 6th, will be our health careers. Again, this is at the sports gym. Then we have SLI, because I know this was a question the last meeting, how this all overlaps. SLI in Fort Worth starts June 9th.
Is Fort Worth before San Antonio? San Antonio.
Did we have that
No,
backwards?
that one's
Sorry.
San Antonio.
Yeah, San Antonio.
San Antonio.
Yeah, it's here.
That's reversed.
Okay,
Yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
that's all right. Yeah, okay, you're right. Okay. But then we start graduations on June 10th. And then SLI in Fort Worth starts the 12th.
No.
Is that right?
Something's wrong.
Yes, I'm sorry. We,
That's wrong.
Yeah, because I thought SLI in San Antonio was the day
SLI in
after,
San Antonio
the day.
begins
the
the
day-
12th of
yeah.
June.
Yeah,
So it's right.
Yeah, I was looking at it right now.
and Fort Worth is, I thought, is it
Fort
Fort Worth
Worth is
later?
the
It's usually 2 weeks
following.
later, or a week later for Fort Worth.
It's the 19th,
Okay,
because that's
19.
my graduation.
okay, so let me back up.
yeah.
Okay, so I'm sorry, that one is.
SLI San Antonio starts June 12th.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's the overlap with graduations.
Right.
And then Fort Worth, there shouldn't be,
It's June 19th through June
Yeah.
22nd.
that won't be a conflict
No, we will be here in town. The SLI is in town.
for San Antonio. So,
And we've gone back and forth. I think I even Ubered last year between graduation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we have.
we hope to be in a position to not have to have a meeting on that June 11th date.
Right.
We'll make sure that happens.
Well, we can't.
Well, we
Right.
can't.
Yeah, no, we'd have to have it another week.
Oh, have it another.
I see.
So if it's okay, we're just gonna right now plan on forgoing that meeting, and then we'll pick back up on June 25th. Then that pretty well gets us to a point of getting ready to kick off the 75th anniversary with Northside ISD Convocation
Oh,
in
this is
August.
75th?
75th, yes, sir, that's the theme. So I think it was sent to principals today.
Y'all remember the theme for the 50th?
It was, what was it?
Isn't it nifty? Northside's 50.
Good Lord.
Bonnie Ellison came up with that. I'm sorry.
No. So does that provide the information as far as calendar? I know there's a lot of other events that we didn't
75.
drill
4th of
into,
July.
but
Bobby, before we leave, I just want to tell y'all that last night I went to the to the leadership class, and one of the parents who came to speak to us about 2 years ago, I think. She was a military parent. She had a child who played soccer. We ended up taking all that into consideration. Well, she is a member of leadership, and she could not thank me enough and wanted me to make sure that the whole board knew that they had made their family just so happy because her child got to go to one school 4 years in a row as a military child. And she was supposed to have gotten an award when all this was going on, and she didn't get it because they thought she was going to have to move, and they gave it to her this year in going back and looking and saying you deserved it at that time, and so we're giving it to you. But she wanted me to tell you all, thank you, thank you, thank you for thinking about the military and how grateful she was to us. And I told her about the military gold card. She knew nothing about it, so that made her day because she says all the soccer games we go to, that would be really good for us. So thank you all on her behalf. Carrie Hicks was her name. And I need to talk to you because her daughter wants to be a lawyer.
You forgot to mention her daughter's been on my soccer team for the
Oh,
last
her
couple
daughter
of
was Bobby. And Noah, our boy, was at the meeting, and he is fabulous.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, good point. All right. I think that ends the night. So we'll go ahead and end the meeting at 8:08. Thank you all.